I never imagined that the child I carried for 9 months, the boy I raised with trembling hands and sleepless nights, would one day stand in front of me and tell me I no longer belonged in the home I built with my own sacrifices. But life has a cruel way of humbling you when you least expect it. My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 62 years old now. When this story begins, I was 54, widowed, tired, and still trying to believe that love given selflessly always returns in some form. I was wrong. The house was unusually quiet that morning. Too quiet. I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee mug, staring at the clock above the fridge. It was nearly 10 a.m., and my son Ethan still hadn't come down. Ever since his marriage 3 months earlier, the rhythm of the house had shifted in ways I didn't understand. This was my house. I bought it with my late husband Daniel 30 years ago. Every corner held memories, scraped knees, birthday balloons, late-night homework arguments, laughter echoing down the hallway. Yet lately, I felt like a guest. Ethan's wife Olivia had moved in immediately after the wedding. They said it made sense financially. I agreed, thinking it would be temporary. I thought it would bring us closer. Instead, it quietly pushed me aside. The kitchen that once smelled of cinnamon pancakes now felt cold. Olivia rearranged everything. Cabinets, furniture. Even the framed photos of Ethan as a child slowly disappeared from the walls. At first, I told myself I was being sensitive. New marriages need space, I whispered to my reflection in the microwave door. But deep down, something felt wrong. After Daniel died from a heart attack 12 years earlier, it was just Ethan and me. I worked 2 jobs, cleaned offices at night, waitressed on weekends. I skipped vacations, new clothes, and sometimes meals just to keep him in private school after his scholarship fell through. I never complained. When Ethan made varsity football, I screamed louder than any parent in the stands. When he failed math twice, I sat with him every night until he understood. When he got into college, I cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't feel guilty for leaving me behind. I loved him fiercely, unconditionally, and I believed, foolishly, that love was enough. Olivia was polite, always smiling. Always thank you, Mrs. Wilson. But her eyes never smiled. She was beautiful in a controlled way. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect tone. She came from a wealthy family. Her parents owned businesses, traveled often, and spoke casually about investments and vacation homes. I didn't fit in that world. I noticed how she corrected Ethan when he spoke, how she rolled her eyes when I told old stories, how she sighed loudly when I cooked traditional meals instead of quinoa salads and grilled salmon. Still, I tried. I gave them privacy, paid most of the bills, babysat their dog when they went out. I even transferred the house utilities to Ethan's name to help him feel responsible. That decision would haunt me. That morning, Ethan finally came downstairs with Olivia close behind him. They stood in front of me like strangers rehearsing lines. "Mom," Ethan said, rubbing his hands together. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Olivia crossed her arms. "We need to talk." Those 4 words have a way of stealing the air from a room. I sat at the table. My heart thudded louder with each second of silence. Ethan cleared his throat. "Olivia and I think it's time for a change." "A change?" I asked carefully. "This house is too crowded," Olivia said smoothly. "We're newly married. We need our own space." I nodded slowly. "Of course, I understand. Are you planning to move out soon?" The room froze. Ethan finally looked at me. "No, Mom, we were thinking." "You should." I laughed, a nervous laugh. "That's not funny." Olivia tilted her head. "We're serious." The mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. "You want me to leave my own home?" I whispered. Ethan's voice hardened. "Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. You can stay with Aunt Linda, or find a small apartment. You're alone anyway. Alone." That word sliced through me like glass. Betrayal doesn't always shout, sometimes betrayal whispers. It disguises itself as logic, as practicality, as what's best. I reminded Ethan that the house was still legally mine, that I paid the mortgage for decades, that I had nowhere to go. Olivia stepped forward. Ethan is the man of the house now. You should respect that. I stared at my son, waiting for him to defend me. He didn't. Instead, he said the words that would replay in my nightmares for years. You're holding us back, Mom. Holding them back. From what? Love? Gratitude? Humanity? They gave me 2 weeks. 2 weeks to pack 30 years of life into boxes. I slept in my clothes because the bed no longer felt like mine. Olivia began repainting the walls before I even left. Ethan stopped eating meals with me. On the final day, I stood in my empty bedroom, touching the faint outlines where family photos once hung. I whispered goodbye to the walls. Ethan drove me to Aunt Linda's house. The ride was silent. Before I stepped out of the car, I looked at him and asked, "Did I fail you as a mother?" He didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead. Aunt Linda tried to help, but her house was small, crowded with grandchildren and noise. I slept on a couch. I felt invisible. Weeks turned into months. Ethan didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask if I was okay. When I finally found a small apartment, I cried on the floor the first night, hugging a pillow like it was a piece of my past life. I told myself I would survive, but survival is not the same as living. Years passed. I aged faster than I should have. I worked until my hands ached. I ate dinners alone. I learned how to sit with loneliness without letting it swallow me whole. Sometimes I passed my old house. New paint, new cars, new curtains. No sign of me. I stopped hoping. And that was when life decided to turn the page. I didn't know it then, but the same son who threw me out like an inconvenience would one day stand in front of me again, older, broken, desperate, begging for forgiveness. But that moment was still far away, and the road between abandonment and regret was paved with suffering, pride, and truths none of us were ready to face. The first year after I left that house felt like a slow, quiet death. Not the dramatic kind people talk about, not something that happens all at once. It was the kind that happens in pieces. Every morning I woke up and realized nothing was waiting for me. No familiar footsteps, no voice calling out, "Mom, where's my tie?" No reason to rush breakfast or keep the house warm. I had never understood how silence could hurt until it followed me everywhere. My apartment was small, too small for someone who once had a backyard, a porch swing, and neighbors who waved when I watered my plants. The walls were thin, the ceiling stained, and the air always smelled faintly of someone else's cooking. I placed my furniture carefully, trying to make it feel like home. But furniture doesn't make a home. People do. I kept my phone on loud at all times, even at night, especially at night. Every time it buzzed, my heart jumped, but it was never Ethan. It was a telemarketer, a bill reminder, a wrong number. I told myself he was busy, newly married, starting a life. I told myself not to be selfish, but the truth was simpler and crueler. He had erased me. Some nights, I took out old photo albums. I hadn't thrown them away, even when it hurt to look at them. There was Ethan at 5, missing his front teeth, holding my hand so tightly his fingers left marks on my skin. Ethan at 10, crying because his science project fell apart. Ethan at 17, hugging me after his father's funeral, whispering, "You're all I have now." I pressed my fingers against those photos as if I could reach through time. What happened to that boy? How did love turn into inconvenience? Winter arrived early that year. The cold crept into my bones faster than I expected. Heating costs were high, and my paycheck was small. I learned how to sleep in sweaters and socks, how to drink hot water when coffee felt like a luxury. One evening, the power went out during a storm. I sat in the dark, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind batter the windows. I thought of Ethan. Was he warm? Was he safe? Did he ever think of me? I whispered his name into the darkness. No answer came. I didn't hear from Ethan directly, but news has a way of finding you even when you don't ask. A neighbor from my old street recognized me at the grocery store. "Oh, Margaret. I didn't know you moved," she said brightly. "Ethan and Olivia have done such a beautiful job with the house." My chest tightened. "She hosts dinner parties now," the woman continued. "Such fancy people. And Ethan looks different, more confident, different." That word followed me home. That night, I cried harder than I had since the day I left, because I realized something terrifying. My son wasn't missing me, he was replacing me. Through small bits of information, I learned more. Olivia had quit her job. Ethan worked longer hours, they bought new furniture, a new car, they traveled. Everything looked perfect from the outside, but perfection is often loud because it's trying to drown something out. I knew that truth well. Stress does strange things to the body. I began forgetting small things, names, dates, where I put my keys. I woke up exhausted even after sleeping for hours. One morning at work, my vision blurred and the floor tilted beneath me. I woke up on a stretcher with a paramedic asking me my name. The doctor said it was exhaustion, dehydration, emotional stress. "Do you have family?" he asked. I hesitated. "I have a son," I said quietly. "Can we call him?" I shook my head. No. That was the moment it finally sank in. I was alone. People often ask why parents don't reach out, why we don't beg, why we don't show up uninvited. The answer is pride. But not the selfish kind. It's the pride that protects the last fragile piece of dignity you have left when someone you love has already taken everything else. I refused to chase someone who had thrown me away, even if it killed me. 2 years passed, then 3. One afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. "Hello?" I said. There was silence, breathing. Then a familiar voice. "Mom?" I froze. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. "Ethan?" My voice trembled. He stopped. "I just wanted to check if you're okay." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just a courtesy call. "I'm fine," I lied. "Oh, good," he said quickly. "That's good." There was something strained in his voice, something tired. Before I could ask anything, he said, "I have to go." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone long after the call ended. That was when I knew something was wrong. Months later, I learned through my sister that Ethan had been sleeping on the couch, that Olivia controlled the finances, that arguments echoed through the house late into the night. "She's very demanding," my sister said carefully. "Ethan seems worn down." I felt no satisfaction, only sadness. Because I had warned him once, gently, lovingly, he hadn't listened. I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. I felt fear that my son was losing himself, fear that he would realize too late what he had destroyed, fear that when he finally came back, I wouldn't recognize the man standing in front of me, or worse, that I wouldn't have the strength to forgive him. I didn't know when Ethan would return. I didn't know what state he would be in. But life has a way of circling back to the places where damage was done, and when it does, it doesn't come gently. It comes demanding payment. And soon, Ethan's debt would come due. By the 4th year after I left that house, I had learned how to live with pain without letting it show. Pain becomes quieter over time, not smaller, just quieter. It moves from your chest into your bones, settles there, and becomes part of how you breathe. I woke up early every morning, went to work, came home, ate simple meals, and slept. I stopped expecting joy. I stopped expecting apologies. I stopped expecting my son. That was how I survived. But while I was learning how to exist without Ethan, his life was slowly unraveling in ways he never imagined. Ethan worked harder than ever after his marriage. At first, it was ambition. He wanted to prove himself, to Olivia, to her parents, to the version of success she believed he should be. Then ambition turned into obligation. Olivia had expensive tastes. She liked the best of everything. The best furniture, the best clothes, the best vacations, the best restaurants, and the best image. Ethan paid for it all. He took extra shifts, accepted overtime without complaint, took on projects he was barely qualified for. When he came home exhausted, Olivia reminded him of everything he still hadn't given her. And slowly, quietly, Ethan began to disappear. Olivia didn't yell. She didn't scream. She controlled. She controlled when they ate, where they went, who they saw. She controlled his phone, his finances, his time. She corrected his words in public and questioned his decisions in private. If Ethan pushed back, she cried. If he argued, she became distant. If he tried to assert himself, she reminded him of everything she had given up to marry him. And if he mentioned me, she became ice. She never liked me, Olivia said often. She wanted to control you. She poisoned you against your own wife. Over time, Ethan stopped defending me, because defending me cost him peace. Ethan learned to stay quiet. Quiet at dinner parties, quiet during arguments, quiet when Olivia insulted him in front of others, quiet when she told him he wasn't good enough, quiet when he felt himself shrinking. And the quiet followed him everywhere, into his sleep, into his work, into his reflection. He gained weight, lost confidence, started waking up tired no matter how long he slept. But he told himself this was normal, this was marriage, this was adulthood, this was the price of love. The first real crack came when Ethan lost his job. It wasn't sudden, it was a slow decline, missed deadlines, poor performance reviews, lack of focus. His manager called him in one morning and spoke gently but firmly. "We're going to have to let you go." Ethan drove home in silence. When he told Olivia, she stared at him as if he had personally betrayed her. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" she said. He waited for concern. It didn't come. From that day on, everything was Ethan's fault. The bills, the stress, the canceled vacation, the smaller grocery budget, Olivia reminded him daily. "If you were more driven, this wouldn't have happened. My father warned me about men like you. I sacrificed everything to be with you." Ethan applied everywhere. Weeks passed, then months. The savings dwindled, and something dark began to grow inside him. Friends stopped calling. Olivia didn't like them. Family gatherings stopped. Olivia didn't feel comfortable. And when Ethan thought about calling me, he didn't, because calling me meant admitting something he wasn't ready to face, that he was wrong, that he had thrown away the only person who loved him without conditions. While Ethan's world collapsed, I was quietly rebuilding mine. Not into something grand, just something stable. I found a better job. Made one friend who brought me soup when I was sick, started volunteering at a local shelter on Sundays. Helping others reminded me that I still mattered, that I still had something to give, that my worth hadn't disappeared just because my son rejected me. The final breaking point came on a rainy Thursday night. Ethan came home late, soaked, exhausted, and empty. Olivia was waiting. She had found emails on his phone, job rejections, financial warnings, a notice about overdue bills. She exploded. "You ruined my life!" she screamed. "I could have married better. I should have listened to my parents," Ethan finally snapped. He yelled back, for the first time, and Olivia laughed. That laugh crushed something inside him. That night, Olivia locked the bedroom door. Ethan slept on the couch. He stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every decision that led him there. Every compromise, every silence, every moment he chose peace over truth. And finally, every moment he chose Olivia over his mother. That was when the guilt came. Not softly, violently. He remembered the day he told me to leave. My shaking hands, the broken mug, the question I asked him before I stepped out of the car. Did I fail you as a mother? He realized then, I wasn't the one who failed. He was. Guilt alone isn't enough to bring someone back. Pride stood in the way, shame, fear of rejection, fear that I wouldn't answer, fear that I would look at him the way he once looked at me, like a burden. So instead of calling me, Ethan sank deeper. By the time Ethan finally understood what he had lost, his marriage was already collapsing, his identity was shattered, and his world was closing in on him. But understanding does not equal courage, and the hardest step was still ahead of him, because the next time he would see me, it wouldn't be as a confident son. It would be as a broken man with nothing left to offer but regret. The thing about rock bottom is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with sirens or warnings. It creeps in quietly, disguised as just one more bad day, until you realize there is nowhere left to fall. That was where Ethan found himself, and he still hadn't found the courage to call me. The house, the one he had pushed me out of, had never truly belonged to him. Not emotionally, not legally. It was still under my name, though I had trusted him enough to handle the utilities, the paperwork, the daily responsibilities. I had believed that trust was permanent. Ethan knew this. Olivia knew this too, and for a long time neither of them cared. But desperation changes people. One evening, Olivia sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table. Her voice was calm, too calm. "I've been talking to my parents," she said. "They think we should sell the house." Ethan looked up sharply. "Sell it? Why?" "Because we need money," she replied simply, "and this place is the only valuable asset we have left." Ethan swallowed. "It's not mine to sell." Olivia leaned back in her chair. "Then get your mother to sign it over." The words hung in the air. Ethan felt sick. "She won't," he said quietly. Olivia's eyes hardened. "Then maybe you never really deserved this house." From that moment on, Olivia changed. She stopped pretending. She mocked him openly, compared him to other men, reminded him daily of everything he failed to provide. And then she began disappearing. Late nights, unexplained trips, her phone always face down. When Ethan asked questions, she smiled coldly. "Why? You don't trust your own wife?" He did, until he didn't. One afternoon, Ethan came home early and heard laughter in the bedroom, a man's voice. His heart dropped into his stomach. He opened the door. Olivia froze. The man looked embarrassed but not surprised. Ethan didn't scream, didn't hit anyone. He just stood there, numb. Olivia broke the silence. "This is what happens when you stop being useful." The divorce was fast, brutal. Olivia took what little savings remained. Her parents' lawyers made sure of that. Ethan didn't fight. He didn't have the strength. He signed papers without reading them, just wanting it to end. When Olivia walked out the door for the last time, she didn't look back. Not once. Without Olivia's income, without his job, without savings, the house became a weight Ethan couldn't carry. Bills piled up, letters arrived, warnings, final notices. Ethan tried to refinance, failed, tried to borrow. No one answered. And one morning the notice came, foreclosure, the same house where he had told me I no longer belonged, now rejecting him. Ethan packed alone, no help, no laughter, no memories worth keeping. He slept on the floor the last night, staring at the ceiling where family photos once hung. He thought of me, of the way I packed quietly, of how I never raised my voice, of how I left without destroying anything. And shame crushed him. While Ethan was losing everything, my life continued, slowly, steadily. I had learned not to wait for apologies that might never come. I planted flowers on my windowsill. I saved a little money. I learned how to smile again, carefully. I told myself that my son's choices were no longer my responsibility. But a mother's heart doesn't obey logic. The night Ethan lost the house, he slept in his car. It was cold. The seats were uncomfortable, the silence unbearable. He stared at his phone for hours. My name sat there, untouched. He typed a message, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Because how do you ask forgiveness from the person you destroyed? That night, Ethan cried for the first time in years. Not quietly, not with dignity. He cried like a child who had finally realized the cost of his pride. He whispered my name, again and again. And finally, he pressed call. But the phone didn't ring, because I had changed my number months earlier, and Ethan didn't know where to find me. For the first time in his life, he was truly alone. And the road back to me was no longer simple. When you lose everything all at once, time stops making sense. Days blur together, nights stretch endlessly. You stop measuring life in hours and start measuring it in regrets. That was Ethan's world now, and mine was about to collide with it again, whether I was ready or not. Ethan spent the first few weeks drifting. Parking lots, cheap diners, gas stations open all night. He learned where he could park without being noticed, without being asked to move along. He showered in public gyms when he could afford a day pass, ate whatever was cheapest, slept lightly, always alert. Every mirror he passed reminded him of what he'd become. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, older than his years. This was the man Olivia left behind. This was the man who once told his mother she was holding him back. Hunger has a way of stripping pride down to nothing. So does loneliness. One night, sitting in his car, Ethan whispered words he had never said out loud before. I was wrong. The words tasted bitter, but also honest. He realized then that losing Olivia, the house, the job, none of it hurt as much as losing me, because everything else could be replaced. I couldn't. Ethan tried to find me. He went back to Aunt Linda's house. She didn't answer the door. Later he learned she had moved. He searched online, public records, old contacts, nothing. It was as if I had disappeared from the world. And in a way, I had. I had stopped being Ethan's mother. I had become just Margaret. At the same time, my life had grown quieter but stronger. I had moved into a slightly better apartment, one with sunlight in the mornings and a small balcony. I started writing letters I never sent. Letters to Ethan, letters to myself. I told myself forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I told myself healing didn't require reconciliation. Still, sometimes I wondered, was he alive? Was he safe? Did he ever regret it? One afternoon, I stopped at a grocery store after work. I was choosing apples when a voice behind me froze my blood. Margaret? I turned slowly. It was a woman I hadn't seen in years. Olivia's mother. She looked older, tired. I heard what happened, she said quietly. My chest tightened. What happened to whom? Her eyes dropped. To Ethan. She told me everything. The job loss, the affair, the divorce, the foreclosure, the car, the streets. I listened without interrupting, without reacting. When she finished, she said softly, "He's been trying to find you." I nodded. I know, that was a lie, but it felt true. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my small kitchen table until dawn, staring at nothing. Part of me wanted to find him immediately, to pull him into my arms, to tell him everything would be okay. Another part of me, the part that remembered the broken mug, the packed boxes, the silent car ride, was afraid. Afraid of reopening wounds that barely healed. Afraid of being thrown away again. At sunrise, I made a decision. I wouldn't chase him, but I wouldn't hide either. I called Aunt Linda, gave her my new number. "If Ethan comes by," I said, my voice shaking, "you can give it to him." I hung up and cried, not because I was weak, but because love never really leaves. 3 days later, Ethan stood at Aunt Linda's door again. This time, she opened it. She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "She didn't want to see you," she said. Ethan nodded. "I understand. But," she continued, "she didn't say she didn't want to hear from you." She handed him a piece of paper. "My number." Ethan's hands shook. He waited hours before calling, practiced what to say, deleted it, started again. Finally, he pressed the button. The phone rang. Once, twice. I answered. "Hello?" There was silence. Then, "Mom." That single word carried years of pain, regret, and longing, and as I held the phone to my ear, my heart pounding, I knew this was not the end of the story. It was the most dangerous part, because forgiveness is harder than anger, and love, once broken, never returns the same. I held the phone to my ear, listening to my own breathing. On the other end of the line, Ethan was doing the same. Years of silence pressed between us, heavy and fragile, like glass ready to shatter with the wrong word. "Mom," he said again, softer this time. I closed my eyes. "Yes," I replied. That single word felt like permission, and judgment, and mercy, all at once. "I didn't know if you'd answer," Ethan said. "I almost didn't," I told him honestly. He swallowed. I could hear it. I deserved that. Silence returned. Not empty this time, careful. I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know that doesn't fix anything. No excuses, no blaming Olivia, no justifications, just those words." I let them sit in the air. "I'm not calling to ask for anything," he added quickly. "I just needed you to know I think about you every day." My hands trembled. For years, I had imagined this moment. In those imaginings he cried, he begged, he explained everything. Reality was quieter and somehow more painful. We spoke for nearly an hour, about nothing, about everything. He told me where he was living, or rather not living. He told me he was between places, that he was figuring things out. I didn't press. Mothers know when not to push. He asked about my health, my job, my apartment. When I told him I was doing okay, his voice cracked. "You always were strong," he said. I almost laughed. Strength is often mistaken for endurance. There was one thing he didn't say, one thing hanging between us. "Can I come to you?" He didn't ask, because he knew asking meant facing the possibility of no, and I didn't offer, because offering meant risking my heart again. So we danced around the truth, careful not to step on the wounds. When the call ended, I sat there staring at the wall. I didn't cry, I didn't smile. I felt undone, as if something I had buried deep inside me had stirred. I realized then that forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process, and I had only just begun. When Ethan hung up, he sat in his car for a long time, staring at his hands. He felt lighter and heavier, because hearing my voice reminded him of everything he had lost, and everything he still might not get back. That night, I wrote a list. Things I needed to protect, my peace, my stability, my self-respect. Love didn't mean sacrifice anymore. Love needed boundaries. I decided something that frightened me. If Ethan wanted back into my life, it would be as an adult, not as a child needing rescue. 2 days later, Ethan called again. "I found a job," he said, "temporary, warehouse work." "I'm glad," I replied. "I was wondering—" He hesitated. "Could we maybe meet, just for coffee?" My heart raced. Meeting him meant seeing the consequences of his choices with my own eyes, but it also meant moving forward. "Yes," I said quietly. "We can do that." We met at a small cafe halfway between us. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Thinner, slouched, eyes tired. But when he saw me, he froze. For a moment, he looked like the boy who once waited for me outside his school. He hugged me awkwardly, briefly, as if unsure whether he still had the right. I let him. Over coffee, he told me everything, the control, the affair, the shame, the nights in his car. Then he looked at me and finally asked the question he had been avoiding. "Mom, I don't have anywhere to go." There it was, the moment I had feared. I took a deep breath. "I can't let you live with me," I said gently. His face fell. "I'm not abandoning you," I continued, "but I won't lose myself again to save you." He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, and I knew he meant it. That hurt more than if he had argued. "I can help you find resources," I said. "I can be here, I can listen, but you have to rebuild your life yourself." Tears filled his eyes. "Thank you for not hating me," he whispered. "I don't hate you," I replied. But love doesn't erase consequences. When we parted, something had shifted, not healed, not fixed, but changed. For the first time, our relationship wasn't built on obligation or guilt. It was built on truth. And truth is uncomfortable, but it's the only foundation strong enough to hold what comes next. Rebuilding a life looks nothing like starting one. There is no excitement, no applause, no sense of endless possibility. There is only work, quiet, exhausting, unglamorous work. That was what Ethan faced now, and for the first time in his life, no one was coming to save him. The warehouse job paid little and demanded much. Ethan lifted heavy boxes for 10 hours a day. His back ached constantly. His hands cracked and bled from dry cardboard and cold air. But he showed up, every day, because not showing up meant slipping back into the darkness he had just escaped. He rented a small room from an older man who barely spoke. It wasn't home, but it was a door that locked and a bed that belonged to him. That was enough, for now. We spoke once a week, short calls, careful conversations, no lectures, no excuses. Sometimes he talked about work, sometimes about nothing at all. Sometimes we sat in silence, and strangely, that felt honest. I didn't ask about Olivia. He didn't bring her up. Some chapters close without discussion. One evening, Ethan received a message, an old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to since before his marriage. The message was casual. "Hey man, heard things didn't work out. Want to grab a drink?" Ethan hesitated. Loneliness has a way of making bad ideas look reasonable. He told himself it was harmless. Just one drink. One drink became several. The bar was loud, familiar, easy. For a few hours, Ethan forgot who he had been, who he was trying to become. He laughed, complained, blamed Olivia, blamed his job, blamed life. And then his phone buzzed. My name. He stared at it, ignored it. The next morning, he woke up on his friend's couch with a pounding head and a sinking feeling. He had missed work. The warehouse called. One warning, just one. He called me that afternoon. His voice was thick with shame. "I messed up," he said. "I waited. I drank, missed work. I didn't yell. I didn't scold." "I can't do this again, Ethan," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, "and I won't ask you to." That scared me more than if he had begged. "I love you," I told him. "But if you choose the path that destroys you, I will not follow." Silence. "I understand," he said. This time he meant it differently. Ethan didn't go back to the bar. He didn't answer those messages. He focused on work, on rest, on routine. Slowly his body adjusted. His mind cleared. He started saving money, small amounts, but it was something. One night, I found myself standing on my balcony, staring at the city lights. I thought about how close I had come to losing him forever, how close I still was. I realized something painful. I was prepared to walk away if I had to, not because I stopped loving him, but because love without limits becomes destruction. Weeks passed. Ethan didn't lean on me, didn't ask for money, didn't ask to stay over. He simply kept going. That was new. And quietly I began to trust him again, not completely, but enough. Rebuilding is fragile. One wrong step can undo months of effort. Ethan knew that now, and so did I. Because the next challenge wouldn't come from temptation. It would come from the past, and not everyone was ready to let go of it. The past never knocks politely. It shows up when you're finally breathing again, when you start believing the worst is over, when you dare to imagine a future that doesn't hurt so much. That's when Olivia returned. Ethan had just finished a long shift at the warehouse when his phone vibrated. A name he hadn't seen in over a year lit up the screen. For a moment, he thought it was a mistake, a memory, something his tired mind created. Then another message appeared. "I need to talk. It's important." His chest tightened. Old emotions rushed in. Anger, shame, desire, fear, and something worse. Hope. Ethan sat on his bed staring at the phone for a long time. He thought about the nights on the couch, the locked bedroom door, the laughter he heard that night. He also thought about how powerful Olivia once made him feel, how she praised him in public before tearing him down in private. Toxic love has a way of rewriting pain as longing. When Ethan called me that week, his voice sounded normal, too normal. He asked how I was, told me work was fine. He didn't mention Olivia. And that silence told me everything. Mothers hear what isn't said. They met at a cafe downtown. Olivia looked polished, confident, untouched by loss. She smiled like nothing had ever happened. "You look better," she said. Ethan didn't know how to respond. She told him her version of events, that she had been lonely, that she made mistakes, that she was confused, that she missed him. She didn't apologize. She reframed. "I heard you're working again," she said casually. "My parents know people, real opportunities." Ethan felt the old pull. Comfort, status, security, a shortcut out of struggle. She leaned forward. "We could try again." Slowly. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He imagined a life where everything was easy again. No warehouses, no cheap rooms, no aching muscles. He imagined walking back into the world he once thought he belonged in. Then he imagined calling me and telling me he was moving back into the lie. His stomach turned. I didn't know the details, but I felt the distance. Our calls grew shorter, his pauses longer. I didn't confront him. I had learned something important. You can't force growth. You can only witness it. Olivia asked to meet again. This time, Ethan said yes, but not for the reason she expected. They sat across from each other, and Ethan finally spoke without fear. "You never loved me," he said quietly. You loved what I could give you. Olivia laughed softly. That's not fair. It is, he replied, and I won't do this again. Her smile faded. She stood up. You'll regret this, she said. Ethan didn't answer. Because regret no longer scared him. That night my phone rang. Ethan. I need to tell you something, he said, and for the first time he told me everything. I listened, without interruption. When he finished, I said only one thing. I'm proud of you. His breath caught. Olivia never called again. She moved on quickly. Some people always do. Ethan felt the loss, but this time it didn't hollow him out. It clarified him. Letting go isn't loud. It doesn't come with speeches or closure. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to stop betraying yourself. That night, Ethan chose himself, and without realizing it, he chose me too. Trust does not return all at once. It arrives quietly, in fragments, in moments so small you almost miss them. For a long time, I believed I would never trust Ethan again the way I once did. Not because I didn't love him, but because love without caution had already cost me everything. And yet, something was changing. Ethan stopped talking about what he would do. He focused on what he was doing. He showed up to work early. He saved money instead of spending it. He kept his word, even when it was inconvenient. Weeks turned into months. And slowly, my fear loosened its grip. Not because he asked for forgiveness again, but because he no longer needed to. There was something I hadn't told Ethan, something I had kept to myself for years. After I left the house, after I learned how easily I could be discarded, I made a decision. I rewrote my will, not out of revenge, out of protection. I didn't remove Ethan completely, but I changed everything else. I told myself it was temporary, a safety measure. Time passed. I never changed it back. One afternoon, Ethan called me excited. I was offered a promotion, he said. It means more hours, but better pay. I smiled. You earned it. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. I won't be able to call every week anymore. Not as often. I hope that's okay. It was. Because he wasn't clinging, he was growing. 2 weeks later, I collapsed at work. Nothing dramatic, no warning, just dizziness. Then darkness. When I woke up in the hospital, a nurse was adjusting my 4th-year son is on his way, she said. I frowned. My son? Yes, Ethan. My heart raced. I hadn't called him. Someone else had. When Ethan entered the room, I saw fear in his eyes. Not guilt, not obligation, fear. He held my hand and didn't let go. I thought I lost you, he whispered. And for the first time in years, I believed him. Later that night, when we were alone, I told him the truth. About the will, about the fear, about why I had drawn boundaries so sharply. I expected anger, defensiveness. Instead, he nodded. You had to protect yourself, he said. I didn't. That was the moment trust returned. Not fully, but honestly. The next day, Ethan did something unexpected. He brought paperwork, not for money, not for inheritance, for accountability. I set up a savings account, he said, for emergencies, for you, for me. I stared at him. I don't expect anything, he added. I just want you to know I'm thinking long-term now. Tears filled my eyes, because this wasn't repentance. This was responsibility. We didn't return to the old roles. I wasn't the provider, he wasn't the child. We became something healthier, 2 adults choosing each other. That night, after he left the hospital, I lay awake thinking about the years we lost, the pain, the distance, the silence, and yet, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Because whatever happened next, we were finally walking forward, together. Some endings are loud. They arrive with arguments, tears, and dramatic words. But the ending of our story came quietly, almost gently. A few weeks after I was discharged from the hospital, Ethan asked me something I never expected. Would you come see the house? The house. The place where I had been told I was no longer welcome. The place I left with 1 suitcase and a broken heart. I hesitated. I don't want to reopen old wounds, I said. He nodded. I understand. I just thought it might help. After a long pause, I agreed. Not for him, for myself. When we arrived, Ethan didn't walk in first. He stepped aside and waited. I stood at the doorway, my hand trembling on the frame. Years ago, I had crossed this same threshold feeling unwanted. Now, no one was rushing me. No one was watching impatiently. I stepped inside. The house looked different, not because the furniture had changed, but because the silence had. It no longer felt hostile. It felt neutral, like it was waiting to see who I had become. Ethan stopped near the hallway. "I never cleaned your room," he said softly. "After you left, I couldn't." I walked in. The bedspread was still folded the way I used to keep it. The lamp sat exactly where I left it, and for the first time since that terrible night, I cried. Not because I was hurt, but because I realized something important. I had survived. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where his wife once told him I was a burden. "She left," Ethan said quietly. I didn't react. I didn't ask questions. "I don't hate her," he continued, "but I finally see who she was and who I became trying to please her." He looked at me. "I lost you trying to keep someone who never cared about either of us." I reached across the table and held his hand. "That's a lesson many people learn too late," I said. "You learned it in time." Before I left, Ethan asked a question I knew was coming. "Would you ever live here again?" The old me would have said yes immediately. The wounded me would have said no without explanation. But the healed me paused. "I don't think so," I said gently. "Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. I love you," I told him. "But I've built a life that's mine now." He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I just wanted you to know. The door is always open." I smiled. "That's all a mother ever wants," I replied. "Not a room, just a door." A month later, I updated my will, not back to how it was before, not as punishment, but as balance. Ethan remained my son, but my future no longer depended on anyone else, because love should be shared, not survived. On my birthday, Ethan surprised me. He didn't bring money or gifts. He brought a framed photo. It was from the hospital, a quiet moment, him holding my hand. "You looked peaceful," he said. "I wanted to remember the moment I stopped being your child and started being your son again." I held the frame close, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Final words. If you are a parent who has been discarded, if your love was taken for granted, if you were made to feel like your sacrifices meant nothing, remember this: you do not lose your worth because someone forgets it. Sometimes they have to lose you to finally see you.